Middlemore Hospital. Rodney Jones from Wigram Capital Partners has been modelling the outbreak since the start of the pandemic and providing the government advice on the trajectory of infections. He is with us now live. Kia ora, Rodney, thanks for being with us on Q&A. From what we understand at the moment, what is the likelihood Auckland will move out of alert level 4 this week?
Yeah, tēnā koe, Jack. Very low. I mean, yesterday was a tough day. I personally was gutted to see those numbers so close to decision day, and then the news overnight of those unlinked infections at Middlemore.
Neither of us wants...
Tough challenge ahead of us.
Yeah, neither of us wants to be the archangel of pessimism, but let me ask this then. If it is unlikely Auckland will move from alert level 4 this week, from the way infections are tracking at the moment, what is the likelihood Auckland will move out of level 4 next week?
Look, we really hope we have a much better week, and that by the time of your show next week, we're looking at low single-digit cases. But the difficulty is we just have these consistent background cases which we don't know where they come from. And the concern is in the background, there's a level of infection and outbreak that we can't get our arms around. We have seen this overseas. We're seeing it going on in Canberra, in ACT, where they continue, they're a week longer into us than this. They're probably at 3 to 3.5 level, but they continue to have these unexplained cases. And that's the challenge with Delta, and that's the concern.
Is there a risk then that we get stuck?
Yeah, that risk is non-zero. We hope it doesn't happen. Elimination's been successful for New Zealand. We've achieved it quickly. We did that a year ago. But Delta just behaves in these ways that is hard to model, because you seem to get these kind of background events or background infections that you just don't, each country has struggled with. So you don't. Well, what we have to start doing is imagining a different path from here. What we've had in the last 18 months has been fantastic, but in a sense, it was a pre-Delta life. It was an echo from kind of a different age. Our life here has carried on, for New Zealanders in the country, has carried on for normal longer than the rest of the world. And this Delta outbreak, we hope this is not the case, but it may be the case that we struggle to get our arms around it, and then we're going to have to start at some point adapting to it. And that would mean the things we're doing in the rest of the country now, with masks, with contact tracing, getting very high level of vaccinations. But it means a lower level of activity. It means more restrictions. That freedom we've enjoyed so much, we may not get back to that point. We hope we do still today. You still hope. But we have to start imagining a world where we don't.
Does that mean we should be imagining a world where Auckland, say, moves to alert level 3 without having stamped out all cases in the community?
The cost, level 4 has given us a big payoff in the past, because we've gone to level 4, we've stamped it out quickly, we've come out of it strong. And up till we went into lockdown now, the economy was doing well. But it may be that we can't sustain that cost, that the cost to the economy becomes too high. That is a possibility that we have to be aware of. And then we move down, but that means we're going to have to use different tools, and that's why I've been so focused on South Auckland, because it's about what sorts of tools are we going to need to kind of manage this pandemic with less restrictions.
Let's talk about South Auckland. You appeared before Select Committee this week and expressed some of your concerns. What do you think the Delta outbreak has taught us about the inequities in the South Auckland community versus other communities in New Zealand?
What we've experienced this time has actually been what we've seen in the rest of the world, that in affluent areas and affluent suburbs, outbreaks are brought under control very quickly. That happened in Sydney, and it's happened, say, with our Birkdale cluster. Even where you have strong institutions like the Māngani AOG Church, they brought it under control relatively fast. Where you get in trouble is where Delta is spreading in socially deprived communities where they face challenges that most New Zealanders can't imagine, where life is difficult, and they lack the sorts of institutions such as churches to support them. And then that's when it spreads, and that's when you get these background cases, and that's where things like level 4 struggle to work.
Right. So what does that tell us about the inequities in our society? We avert our eyes. The inequality that is evident in South Auckland, but also in Northland and Poverty Bay on the East Cape, we avert our eyes. And the costs of this inequality has manifested over a long period of time. The thing with COVID is the cost appears over 3 months. You get a Delta outbreak in a society, in a part of your community that struggles, and you can't control it, you can't manage it. So it just is like in the Great Depression, we created the welfare state in New Zealand in response to that. In the US, they had the New Deal. Well, we, in a way, need a New Deal. We can no longer ignore the inequality. What you're saying is that in the past, people in affluent communities have been able to divert their eyes, but at the moment, everyone in Auckland, at the very least, is at alert level 4, and part of that is because the inequalities that people have ignored for so long are continuing to contribute to the length and severity of this Delta outbreak. Exactly,
we're paying the cost today rather than 30 years' time, or through health spending or through prisons. We're paying the cost today. And we need to face that we can't live like this, that this has been a consequence of what we did in the 80s and 90s and those sorts of reforms we've adopted. It meant more inequality. We thought we could live with that. We can't.
So this then might be an opportunity to reset. What do you think we should change?
Well, I think we need to build surge capacity today. So we need to think about the longer term drivers, and we've tried to do that. It's been hard for the politicians, though, because it's not that popular to confront these issues. So we've tended to put it to one side. That's understandable. We now need to recognize we're in a different space. So today what we need most importantly is surge investments. We need more negative pressure wards at Middlemore Hospital. We need more spending on Middlemore. We need to bring in ICU new nurses from offshore. We need to hire globally and bring them and their families in through MIQ. We need to build up our capacity. But then also at the grassroots, on the ground public health. We need to build up our grassroots, our on the ground capacity at the ground level, and that means working with the communities. It doesn't mean creating new layers of bureaucracy. It means empowering the local community, and they've done a great job through this in a challenging circumstance. We need to find ways financially that the government can direct resources to them.
Right from the beginning of this pandemic, Rodney, public health officials have expressed concern about South Auckland in particular, and of course we have seen multiple COVID-19 outbreaks in South Auckland. How do you think the Ministry of Health has handled the risk in that area?
I just think we do have an issue in New Zealand, and that is that Wellington is different and is very far in life experience from South Auckland. We saw that with the Papatoetoe outbreak, an outbreak that should have been got under control and handled very quickly. Somehow we couldn't get our arms around that. And so we do need to reimagine, and things we're doing with the Māori Health Authority is the direction we need to be going. This can't be top down, it has to be bottom up.
Is there an economic argument?
And that means providing resources.
Right. Is there an economic argument for providing resources as well as a moral argument for increasing spending in that area?
Yeah, well, going back to the 1930s, the economic payoff to adopting a welfare state was very high. So the economic payoff today to addressing it, South Auckland will be our front line over and over. And the more we invest resources and commit resources to South Auckland, the fewer restrictions we will have, because as we get recurrent Delta outbreaks, we'll be able to deal with them quickly at less cost. And then when we're finished with South Auckland, we need to do Northland. As tourists come back, we need to think about the East Cape, we need to think about Poverty Bay, we need to think about other areas in New Zealand.
I know since the start of this pandemic, you and your colleagues have been modelling the spread of COVID-19 and the trajectory of the pandemic and infections around the world. I think at the start of this year, you said, perhaps optimistically, you hoped with vaccines that it would be a 2-year global shock. Where do you see it going globally now?
Yeah, well, the Indian outbreak and then the spread of Delta changed everything. And that optimism, we hoped that the vaccines would get in front of the virus and that we would bring it under control. Now, that can still happen in the future. The vaccines are playing catch-up, and one day they will catch up with the virus will stop evolving, and the vaccines will move faster. So that may happen, but it may take longer now. It may take up till 5 years. The good news is we can watch places like Singapore that have, a high level of cases today, 300 cases, but among vaccinated people, low hospitalizations, only one person who's vaccinated in ICU, only one death from COVID in the vaccinated, and there was a woman in her 80s, that we can get to a place where, like a lot of things we do in public health, where we minimize the cost. We can get there, but it will mean we'll have to do things differently to what we've done so far.
And Rodney, at the start of this interview, you said we need to have some honest conversations about what we do going forward if we're stuck, if Auckland can't stamp out these small number of community cases. At what point do you think we would have to change our strategy in the coming months?
Okay, the coming months is the right way. Elimination has worked for us. We can't give up just because we've had a setback. We keep trying, but we have to be conscious that there's a possibility we don't succeed.
All right. Thank you very much for your time and expertise as always. We really appreciate it, Rodney. That is Rodney Jones from Wigram Capital Partners.